want Nick! We 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 want Nick!
Good evening. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. Welcome to the 2014 Speech Team Regional Performance.
Since the day Trump entered the political arena, the American right wing has become unrecognizable from itself today. The Republican Party insisted for decades that it was made up of colorblind meritocrats who treasured the consent-based morality of the West and the free marketplace of ideas that it offered. But it's since faced a crisis of performative contradictions. And the most incriminating yet somehow previously undetectable issue that's shattered the current right-wing lens is the nation of Israel. And at the age of 18, one kid pointed this out and he saw his entire world collapse around him. No mercy was given and no good faith rebuttal was provided. The response to these mere questions was an orchestrated, malicious, controlled demolition of a child's life and reputation. And if anybody mentioned this extreme reaction, it would only confirm their own personal involvement in the heresy. And so, as intended, nobody came to his defense. Nicholas Joseph Fuentes was born on August 18, 1998, to a middle-class Catholic family outside of Chicago. He's described himself as always having been interested in politics, and that he used to be a typical right-wing Republican with neocon and libertarian sensibilities. Until the Trump era began.
Another Republican joining the race, but this one like no other, Donald Trump.
And so it began. Once he graduated from Lyons Township High, Nick went on to Boston University, where he became known as a prominent Trump supporter during a time when open support for the soon-to-be president was basically social suicide. But Nick's entry into the political sphere really came when he debated the senior and president of the BU student government during his freshman year. After participating in a video put on by Boston University called Who I'll Be Voting For, Nick stated his intention to vote for Trump, which then instigated the debate. The original video has since been taken down by the school. Even Nick was still under the spell of the neocons back then. As he told the crowd, "It has nothing to do with race, everything to do with culture. Asia has taken our culture and done well for themselves. The Middle East, not so much." Even though his performance wasn't publicized in any meaningful mainstream way, it grabbed the attention of some of the right-wing outlets that were desperate to recruit the Gen Z youth. The Daily Wire and other relevant figures had identified him as a soon-to-be star with enormous potential.
So I did something on the campus. I debated the class president or whatever. It's a long story how it got going, and that's how I actually met Cassie Dillon. She live streamed it on Periscope, and she told me after the fact, she said, Ben Shapiro watched it, and I told him he needs to take you under his wing.
Nick now seemed happy with the trajectory he was on. He started hosting a show on the Right Side Broadcasting Network, which he called America First. And even though it received little attention, he trudged along as he was inducted into the media world of the right wing. And as Trump continued to initiate the political revolution that was to come, Nick noticed an exception to the tenets of the new right-wing movement. It was an exception that was made without reason or even consistency. The unconditional support of Israel.
And the show wasn't even big. I had like 100 live viewers. I would get 1,000 views per episode. But they were on top of this. And even Ben Shapiro, he quote tweeted one of my tweets and said, because I said something to the effect of, if you're Mexico first, live in Mexico. If you're China first, live in China. If you're Israel first, live in Israel. And he quote tweets me on Christmas Eve and says, well, that's the surest sign you're an anti-Semite, is to accuse a Jew of dual loyalty. And I'm sitting there like, it's true. You do have dual loyalty.
He then began to see the response to any criticism of Israel or any Jewish person more generally as being smeared as inherently anti-Semitic. This was a foreign country with a higher average living standard than the United States that the U.S. was sending money to, while the MAGA movement claimed to be against foreign aid.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo. The American people will come first once again.
Israel was also proudly an ethno-state, while the broader Republican world had been desperate to reject any form of racial exclusivity.
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture.
I don't believe that our unifying principle was ever race, skin color, ethnicity. Our unifying principle was essentially a doctrine. It was the doctrine of human rights.
Nick asked the questions. What was going on with Israel? And isn't this style of support for them contradicting our principles?
I said, why does the United States give Israel $3.8 billion per year? What do you make of this whole arrangement? I said, is it because they are our closest ally and I'm missing something? I said, or are we being lobbied? And there's this deep contradiction and double standard, and it's obviously being enforced by foreign influence and money. And I remember they hated the line of questioning.
And when you say they, you're referring to this friend group?
Yes,
okay.
This Daily Wire friend group. They were all writers there, and you could still find their articles online. And they, at first it was sort of playful. They said, oh, haha, very good. They almost thought I was joking. They said, oh, it's very funny, but you really shouldn't ask that, they would say. They'd say, there's a good answer for all those questions. They'd say, but the way you're asking it is anti-Semitic, they said. And we're happy to talk with you one-on-one in person, like they're going to teach me how to ask the question. They said, because the way you're saying it, it sounds hateful and it's wrong.
6 years ago to the day, I did a debate on Twitch. They banned me on Twitch because I did so well, and they changed the terms of service to do it. Banned on YouTube, banned on Twitch, banned on PayPal, banned on Stripe, banned from Bank of America, banned from Chase Bank, banned from U.S. Bank, banned from Airbnb, banned from Delta Airlines, banned from CPAC, banned from Email Octopus, Authorize.net, banned from DLive, banned from Instagram, Facebook. I've been banned from shit you haven't even heard of.
But what really gained Nick Fuentes' infamy was not his quarrels with the right-wing youth-centered outlets. It was his involvement in what was eventually portrayed as the true, yet hidden underbelly of the Trump movement.
When did you get to 100%? When did you know this is something that I have to do for yourself?
Charlottesville.
The Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville happened in August of 2017, and it gave the media a great opportunity to skewer the growing support for Donald Trump as the very thing they wanted it to be all along, a Nazi-like fervor. It was also a wonderful photo op. Nick was publicly scrutinized for the participation and damned as the worst thing you could possibly be, a white racist man. Having now been stripped from the mainstream track he had previously been on, Nick started uploading his show to YouTube in 2017. His viewership was not spectacular, but his following slowly grew over the next few years. He would soon garner what has been described as a cult-like following, and these followers are now widely known as Groypers. Nick left Boston University once his freshman year ended, and he remained in the underground of the right wing as he was harassed and publicly smeared as a Holocaust denier and anti-Semite. But the questions being asked were legitimate, and the dismissal was not an answer. And that is what has become so obvious, that still, no one seems to want to give him an answer.
And, this is something that maybe is helpful to explain my mindset. I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong. I'm pushing on all these narratives, the foreign aid, the Iraq war, all of it. And I'm waiting for someone to tell me, here's all the evidence, the obvious evidence that it isn't all just a big thing. Mm-hmm. It's not just a big conspiracy. And I'm asking in good faith, where is that evidence? Cassie, my friend, and all the rest of them. And instead of getting an answer, I'm getting blocked. I'm getting tattled on. I'm getting clipped out of context. They're selling me out to the left. I'm getting called names.
Even with the terrible news coverage, he persisted with a nightly show without any help from a single mainstream right-wing outlet. And he kept asking the questions on the subjects that no one else would touch.
And I would even say that the Holocaust falls under this category. When I hear these stories about gassing your own people, stealing and kidnapping hundreds of thousands of kids, bombing orphanages, cutting babies' heads off, it reminds me of all the stories about the Holocaust. Do you even know all of them? They say, for example, about the Holocaust, everyone knows the basic story. I always get grilled about it. They say, do you believe that 6 million died? Do you believe that they used gas chambers? And do you believe that it was a systematic extermination of the Jewish people? Those are the three concrete claims about the Holocaust that they enforce. But did you know that claims have been made by Holocaust survivors at various times in history that go far beyond those three things? Some have said, for example, that Jews in concentration camps were masturbated to death, that Nazi scientists were experimenting on them with masturbation machines, and they were masturbating them to death. Do I have to believe that?
Since he was now essentially blacklisted from mainstream conservatism, he began building what has now become a parallel right-wing movement. It rejects the pluralistic, classically liberal modern right and cultivates both a nationalist and racialist ethic that's predicated on Christian priors rather than the libertarian and market-centered presuppositions of the more palatable new right. He even started his own annual event called AFPAC, this being a response to his banning from CPAC and Turning Point USA events.
I think I remember you in Orlando. I was in Orlando. I remember you kicked me out there too. I probably did. Or maybe it was Dallas. I don't remember. Ben, it's great to see you. Why did you give a 45-minute speech about me at Stanford, and you won't even look at my Come on, I'm right here.
He spent the next few years in the underground fostering a larger following while also completing his associate's degree. But it was in 2020 that Nick would receive another targeted lashing from the powers that be. Fuentes was at the Stop the Steal rally at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, where he helped stir up the crowd. And while he never entered the Capitol itself, that didn't stop the government from coming after him. The persecution then continued as Nick was permanently banned from YouTube and he was forced even deeper underground. Nick was able to find some autonomy through the online platform called Cozy TV, where he aired his show following the ban. Once the free speech website Rumble increased in relevancy, Nick started uploading his America First episodes there. His following began to snowball, and as his prominence grew, we saw one of the most surprising collaborations of all time. Ye, the artist formerly known as Kanye West, posted that he was in communication with Nick. And after Ye had his own public denunciation of Jewish power, they came out together on multiple occasions for some very viral moments.
Yo, you know I'm here with my white supremacist homeboy, Nick. We back.
You know, blacks are overrepresented in violent crime. But when you meet an individual black person, you don't apply that. You start with a fresh slate every time you meet someone. Do you do that with Jews? Nope.
In 2022, a dinner took place between Ye, Nick, and Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Nick was only 24 years old at the time, and he was yet again smeared as being worse than the devil.
Meeting of the mindless at Mar-a-Lago. We learned on Friday that Trump had dinner with Kanye West and a white supremacist / Holocaust denier named Nick Fuentes.
After Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter following his insistence that he was a champion of free speech, he reluctantly allowed Nick back onto Twitter, now called X. Through the freedom that Rumble provided and this new access to X, Nick's relevance and popularity skyrocketed. His infamy had grown to such a degree that he was even made the target of an assassination attempt in December of 2024. And it's curious to notice just how little coverage or support he received in response to it. Throughout the many years filled with smears and exclusion, there has still not been a single mainstream right-wing figure who has consistently defended Nick from the start. Even Tucker Carlson recently moved from ignoring to now mocking him, and he still refuses to have him on.
Nick Fuentes, this child, this weird little gay kid in his basement in Chicago.
Nick's posts on X responding to mainstream conservatives like Charlie Kirk get enormous engagement and almost always ratio the original poster in a matter of minutes. But these figures still go through whatever lengths they can to pretend he doesn't exist, while they shamelessly announce their undying support of free speech. It's an inexcusable performative contradiction.
I say, if you truly believe in open debate in the marketplace of ideas, will you ever be willing to debate Nick Fuentes, or will you wait until his movement forces you to adopt his talking points, as we've seen already?
You know, it's funny. I personally do not give a platform to bad faith actors.
But now in mid-2025, we see clips of Nick being played on CNN and other left-wing outlets, and he's treated as a legitimate spokesman on the right. Now, this may be for the utility of bashing Trump's base, or showing Nick's humor as being indicative of extremism. But regardless, this is clearly a much different landscape than when the young Fuentes was relegated to Cozy TV. And this ascension to now being taken as a serious commentator strikes me as the political equivalent of when Nirvana went mainstream. Nick didn't go to the mainstream came to him. And the event which is the most blatant evidence of Nick's influence on the actual mainstream culture is the song and video released by Ye, Hail Hitler. And without Nick's early involvement in the Jewish question, I can guarantee the culture would not be where it is today. But what is truly inexcusable is the refusal to answer the questions being asked in good faith. The right wing claims to be opposed to censorship. They say they are free speech absolutists. They proudly announce their side is a free marketplace of ideas, except for when it comes to one particular country with one particular ethnicity. But what fails to be addressed is the fact that if Nick's political propositions are true, the implications are not just catastrophic to the post-war liberal order consensus, but to all political models more generally. And the main fundamental argument which all things seem to flow from is that there are genetic, inherent differences between the races, which results in the disparities we see in racial performance outcomes, intelligence, and general behavior patterns. Because if this is true, and it continues to be denied integration into our political models, then we can assure ourselves that a dreary fate for our society has officially been secured. Because if the original diagnosis is not correct, then the prescription by definition can never be correct. And the mainstream Jewish-funded right-wing forces won't even give an answer to try and refute the conclusions drawn by Nick. There's a deep tendency to consider something as truthful only when it is sourced from an individual or an institution we respect. Just revisit the advice given by the ordained experts during Corona for endless evidence of that, or the article from George Clooney which then directed the acceptable discourse on Biden's mental state. But truth does not lie in a person or an institution simply due to who or what the vessel is. Truth is demonstrable in one thing only: predictive power. Nothing else matters. No credential, last name, or job title counts for anything. Accurate, consistent predictions are the only measuring tool for the evaluation of truth. And if any model that is being used to predict continues to be accurate, it must be in some way rooted in truth. And what cannot be denied is that Nick Fuentes' political model has made consistently accurate predictions.
Israel benefits from the attack by Hamas because now they get to solve the Gaza question finally. Now they get to go in and kill them all and ethnically cleanse this region. In doing so, they know they're provoking and basically an unavoidable retaliation. There's an unavoidable reciprocal attack by these Iranian militias against Israel. And all that does is give Israel an excuse to do what they always wanted to do, which is to bomb Iran's centrifuges, which is their nuclear program. And if they do that, then Iran is in a war with Israel, and then they draw the United States into a war with Iran. And they get the crown jewel, what they always wanted, which is an end to the regime in Syria and an end to the regime in Iran. And that seems to be the big play that Israel is making.
People say, well, if Trump gets elected, he'll be better on tech censorship. Trump is implying he'll use the government to crack down on so-called anti-Semitism on the internet. That's what Republicans are doing right now. That's what all the Zionist donors are complaining about, is the anti-Semitism on TikTok and X. So I'm actually less confident that Trump will allow us to have our free speech than we would under a Democratic administration.
I said that before you came on. I said, listen, I have guests on that are consistently right. You disagree with overall your views or whatever, but you've been dead on. So my North Star is who's the most accurate. That's what I have on. So you did predict all this, which makes me physically ill. So what? Look at the crystal ball, Nick Fuentes. What is going to happen, and then what do we do?
And if his predictions continue to be correct, what would this imply about his other beliefs? Given no credible challenges are offered, and instead we've seen desperate smearing and censorship, it seems to be very obvious what the implications are. Something must not be right with the program's societal worldview. And what Nick Fuentes is calling out appears to be pressing on the very things that expose the lies that this consensus is based on. But despite this struggle, what we do know for sure is that the lies cannot prevail. The truth will win out.
And the only reason that I'm telling you this now is because if anything happens to me, this is what you need to do. The project of the free people of America, the project of American sovereignty, of Christian nationalists, of anybody that cares about our independence, as the 1776 movement, as the new American Revolution, is to, just as they started newspapers and campus groups and book clubs and published books and made movies, we need to expose what they are doing in the same way. And the reason I'm telling you all this now is so that you can finish it if I can't. Because I won't even let death stop me.